Well, good morning, church. It is good to see you this morning. My name is Ryan White. I'm the family pastor here at River's Edge, and I am just thrilled to be opening up God's Word with you this morning. So if you do need a Bible or a pen, our amazing ushers can get one for you. Just wave them down. They can hand one to you, and if you'd like to keep it, you can. If you just need it for the service, you can drop things on the back table on your way out. But now that you have a Bible, we will be in Luke chapter 24. We'll be reading verses 36 through 49 this morning. We are getting to the end of our journey through the Gospel of Luke. We're technically pretty much there, right? We got 3 verses left that we're saving for next week's kind of grand finale. But this morning we are in the final story of Luke's narrative. And we're going to dive in and explore it together today. So, we're in this season after Easter. We're celebrating the empty tomb, and we're wrestling with what it means that Jesus is alive. What does it mean for us that he rose from the dead? Because his resurrection is more than just kind of the happy ending of his story. It's really the opening scene. It's the beginning chapter of a whole new story of what God is doing in the world and in the story of humanity and human existence. The resurrection is the beginning of a new act of creation. And for me, this Easter season, the empty tomb has kind of been front and center for our family. And it's really because of one of our little family traditions that we do. We make these tabletop resurrection gardens. And we actually, I got to share this tradition of ours with the kind of whole family's kind of community here at the church. And we made these little resurrection gardens. And it's a wonderful image of the kids. And it puts the empty tomb just like front and center. And I hope for those of you who made one this year that you enjoyed it. I realized that I might need to improve the instructions because while we had our 6 inches of grass by Easter Sunday, I know that there was some that only had like a couple little sprouts. And I know this because we had a little boy come over to our house, and he walked in and he saw our garden with its grass, and he just started crying. He's like, I only had 3. It's like, okay, we got to work on those instructions for next year. Some parents I have no green thumb. My wife is the one who can grow anything. And so maybe we have to fix the instructions to say, more dirt, more seeds, more water. But it's been this wonderful little image that's just anchored our celebration this season. And the center of it is that little terracotta pot that represents Jesus' tomb. And we had put a figure in there, and we wrapped it in cloth, and on Good Friday we shut the tomb with the stone, and then the tomb was empty Easter morning. And we were celebrating resurrection. And ever since Easter, my daughter has been burying and resurrecting all of her toys, like over and over again. She's got this little resurrection side business that she's running for the toys. But it's been this just wonderful thing, and it's anchored our celebration. And as I've sat there every morning just staring at the tomb and reflecting about the actual events of that first Easter, I think what struck me this year was my distance from it. This happened a long time ago in a place quite far from here. And sometimes it's hard to really feel your connection to these events, right? Sure, I understand it, but I want to know it deep in my bones. I understand that Abraham Lincoln was shot by John Wilkes Booth at Ford Theater, but I don't know that in my bones, right? And I look at the empty tomb sometimes and I wonder, true, his body was never found, right? True, you can still visit the tomb to this day. I've been there. True, we have the 500 eyewitnesses who all gave their testimony that they saw him alive and in the flesh, that 3 days after his execution, he was alive again. But even those eyewitnesses have been gone for a very long time, for millennia, for generations. And as I sat there and I stared at the little tomb, I think what was the most compelling piece of evidence for me this year was the fact that 2,000 years later, the church exists. That something happened that Easter that so transformed those men and women who at that point, after Jesus' crucifixion, were broken, were fearful, were just in despair. Something happened to change them. And there's these real questions when you look back at history that have to be answered. Like, how did Christianity come up so rapidly and with such power? Right? There's all sorts of folks that had thought they had found the Messiah, and then their leader gets killed, and no one else says, oh, he rose from the dead, and kept going for thousands of years. You have all these Jews that all of a sudden, almost overnight, are starting to worship a man as God. Something that's kind of entirely foreign to their spirituality and worldview. How do you explain that? You have these folks that for decades give it as their witness that they saw a man rise from the dead. And they ultimately, most of them, give their life for that witness. Something happened. Something happened to explain why these kind of regular folk, these folk that are unimpressive from the world's standards, launched a movement that changed an empire and changed a world. Whether you're a believer or a skeptic, there is this discernible Easter effect, right? Something happened that Sunday to change their perspective, to lift their spirits, and to give them the power and resources to change the world. We see this Easter effect. It's this movement from despair to joy. And what we witness in their lives of the disciples after Easter is what one writer has said this way. We see the joy of people who had become convinced. They were witnesses to something inexplicable, but nonetheless true. Something that gave a superabundance of meaning to their lives and that erased the fear of death. Something that had to be shared, something with which to change the world. That, for me, is the most compelling evidence of the empty tomb. That Jesus so did a work in the lives of those disciples that everything changed. Right? And we get to see that happen in this story. This is where the gospel ends in Luke 24. We are going to step into that final encounter between Jesus and his disciples, where this Easter effect takes place, where this work of transformation begins. So if you could turn with me. We're in Luke 24. We'll be in verse 36. And we'll hear of this final encounter. And as this is the disciples, were talking about these things, Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace to you." But they were startled and frightened and thought they saw a spirit. And he said to them, "Why are your hearts troubled? And why does doubt arise in your hearts? See my hands, my feet. It is I myself. Touch me and see. For a spirit doesn't have flesh and bones, as you see that I have." And when he said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. And while they disbelieved for joy and were marveling, he said to them, "Have you anything here to eat?" And they gave him a piece of broiled fish. I'm picturing tilapia, a little lemon, garlic, pepper. And he took it and ate it before them. And he said to them, "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses and the prophets and the Psalms, the whole breadth of the Hebrew Scriptures must be fulfilled." And then he opened their minds to understand the Scriptures and said to them, "Thus it is written that the Christ should suffer and on the third day rise from the dead, and that repentance and the forgiveness of sins should be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning in Jerusalem. You are my witnesses of these things. And see, I am sending the promise of my Father upon you, but stay in the city until you are clothed with power from on high." This story blows me away. And remember what's happened so far. You've had the women who have reported that the tomb was empty. And they have this testimony of angels saying he's alive. You have Cleopas and his companion who Jesus mysteriously reveals himself to on the road to Emmaus. You have this rumor that Jesus has appeared to Peter. But they're all kind of hints and whispers. They're just starting to begin to kindle that hope in the disciples' hearts that had died when they watched Jesus get crucified. And they're starting to have this moment of, could it be true? Could it be true? Could he really be alive? Could he really have beaten death like he said he would? And in this scene, in this part of the story, this is Jesus' big coming out party. It's the moment when he finds his crew and says, "Guess what, guys? I'm back. I'm alive. I'm here." But honestly, if it were me, I think I would have rolled in with a little bit more flash. You know? Be like one of those professional wrestlers who's kind of coming in, the theme music and the smoke and the lights, you know? It would be, "Hey guys, I'm back! Come on! I beat death, I'm undefeated, you know? Come on, Peter, deny this. Thomas, you down now? Come on. I beat death." I would be gloating a little bit. I'd be, it's not every time someone rises from the dead, right? You're first. But that's not how Jesus kind of carries himself. In fact, this is a surprisingly small and intimate scene. I think this great reveal in it, Jesus is saying it's about the relationships, it's about the people. He's not flexing his muscles, he is coming to his people to love on them, right? And it reminds me of what I would possibly do, maybe if I had another afternoon with my beloved grandparents who have passed. What would I do if I had some divinely purchased time? I think it would look a lot like this, right? Around a table, talking and eating. And this encounter that we read about, it's important because Jesus knows what the disciples have been through. He knows the grief and the struggle and the crises of faith. He knows that they're afraid and that everything they thought they had been investing in these last 3 years just kind of went up in smoke when he was crucified. We hear in John's gospel that they're actually huddled together in one house with all the doors locked and the windows shut. They have these glimmers of hope, but they haven't experienced that Easter effect yet, right? And it's in this moment that he shows up in their midst. And he's here to build their faith, to increase their confidence. He wants to really love on these men and women and show them what they need to see to believe, to actually trust that this is happening, that he is alive, and that death has been overcome. So he says, guys, look, it's me. Look, it's me. Touch me. Feel me. Hear my voice. If you need to grab me, you can put your fingers in the scars. You know? Hey, I'm not a ghost. I can eat. Actually, what's for dinner? Let's do this. Whatever you need, pull my hair, whatever you need. Realize I'm here. I'm alive. That's what this scene is about. And while it is really for those that are there with him in the room, I think this scene actually has a lot to communicate to us as well. Because what it really does is it shows us this transformation, right? It shows us what a life that has been totally changed by Easter looks like. Because this is where the resurrection life of Jesus starts to spill over and have an impact in the lives of those who follow him. So let's explore this through that lens. What are the marks of someone who has been transformed, completely changed by Easter? Well, the first thing we see here, we see peace and we see joy, even though it's still kind of mingled with some lingering doubt. Peace and joy. The first thing Jesus says to them is, Shalom Aleichem. Peace be with you. And peace is one of those great biblical words. It means the absence of conflict, yes, but it also means something far more. It means the presence of wholeness and completeness. It's this kind of